The air in the royal palace of Omidike was thick with the scent of burning udu incense, meant to ward off sickness. Palm oil lanterns flickered against the stone pillars, their glow barely pushing back the suffocating gloom. Princess Odera stood at the threshold of her brother's chamber, hands clasped before her. Beyond the heavy wooden doors, Prince Onoka, beloved heir to the throne, lay motionless. He had always been a towering presence, a leader shaped by fate itself. The future of Omidike. Now, he was dying. Odera had spent her life in the comfort of his shadow, a presence neither questioned nor challenged. She was the sister of the future king, her role defined since birth, to support, never to rule. But the world had shifted beneath her feet. The throne could not remain empty. And though she had not asked for it, power now loomed before her. In the Grand Council chamber, titled chiefs and elders gathered in silence, their faces carefully unreadable. At their center stood Chancellor Zobolo, his flowing red ISI egu robes pulling around his feet like spilled ink. The kingdom cannot falter, he said smoothly, his voice laced with measured authority. Prince Onoka's fate remains uncertain, and Omidike must not be left without guidance. Odera tensed beneath the weight of their stares. She had never been trained for this. She knew diplomacy, knew how to navigate courtly grace, but lead. She opened her mouth, hesitating. "You are his blood," Zobolo continued. "And until he recovers, you must be regent." A murmur rippled through the room. Some nodded in agreement, others exchanged uneasy glances. The doubt in their eyes was suffocating. She wasn't supposed to be here. She looked toward Queen Ijeoma, her mother, but the older woman remained composed, a queen first, a mother second. She did not object. Odera swallowed hard. She had no choice. "If that is what the kingdom requires," she said softly, "then I will do what must be done." The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. The great hall of Omidike's royal court was lined with banners bearing the insignia of the kingdom, a golden idolatry, symbolizing strength. The stained glass windows cast colored light upon the marble floors, illuminating the long stretch of space where titled men and women gathered to speak of war, trade, and alliances. And at the center of it all, Odera sat upon the throne. Onoka's throne. It was too big for her. She felt it in the way her back never quite met the carved mahogany rest, how her hands rested on the armrest like they did not belong there. But she held her posture, shoulders squared as she listened to the elders and nobles debate matters of state. Dutifully, she signed decrees, listened to petitions, approved trade policies, going through the motions of a ruler. Yet, she could feel it in the air. The unspoken doubt. The measured glances. The quiet judgments. She was not Onoka. The kingdom knew it. The titled chiefs knew it. And so did she. She had overheard their whispers in the halls, words meant to be spoken in confidence but never far from her ears. The princess is untested. She is a shadow, nothing more. A child pretending at power. Each word chipped away at the fragile confidence she had built. At night, she found solace in the castle archives, wandering through the vast, candlelit chambers filled with ancient scrolls. She traced her fingers over the brittle parchment of an old manuscript. Is Ndubuisi the Conqueror? Queen Adana the Wise? Onoka the Just? Names that carried weight, power, history. And what would history call her? Odera the Unwanted. The Shadow Regent. A frustrated breath escaped her as she closed the scroll. Her rule was a throne built on borrowed time. But for how long? The rebellion began as a whisper. Odera had sensed the unease even before the first rumors reached the palace. The markets of Omidike were restless. She had seen it in the wary glances of traders, in the hushed conversations that stopped when palace guards passed. Then, the first decree appeared. A false proclamation, bearing the royal seal, circulated in the villages. It claimed that Odera had orchestrated Anoka's illness to steal his throne. She read it twice, her pulse quickening. The message was poison, crafted to sow distrust. By midday, the city streets were filled with murmurs. She is not the rightful ruler, they said. She has no strength. She is a shadow. The words followed her like a spectre, echoing through stone corridors and courtly meetings. When the accusations reached the council chamber, the room was in uproar. We must investigate, declared Chief Osodi, his voice smooth, too measured. A noble with too much ambition in his gaze. The people are uneasy. If the princess lacks their trust, Odera's temper snapped. I do not require their trust to rule. Her voice cut through the chamber, sharper than intended. A dangerous silence followed. Even Zubolo, her chief advisor, arched a brow. I have sworn to protect Umudike, she continued, voice measured now. If this rebellion rises, I will put it down myself. Zubolo smiled then. But the expression did not reach his eyes. As expected of our regent, he said smoothly. A chill crawled up her spine. Something in his words, the way he had said them, unsettled her. She had been right. This was only the beginning. That night, Odera found Zaram waiting in the training grounds. The courtyard was empty except for the two of them. The moon hung high in the sky, its pale light casting shadows over the worn stone floor. The scent of damp earth lingered in the air, mingling with the faint smoke from the dying torches mounted along the palace walls. Zaram stood with his arms crossed, his broad frame outlined against the dim lantern glow. He was Anoka's closest friend, the captain of the Umona Guards. A man who had fought alongside her brother and never once questioned his rule. He had a warrior's presence, all quiet intensity and calculated strength, and for the first time, Odera wondered if he would ever look at her the way he had looked at Anoka. With respect. With certainty. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal bloodline, but as he stood there, watching her with dark, assessing eyes, she couldn't tell if that loyalty extended to her. You need to learn how to fight, he said simply, tossing her a carved wooden staff. Odera barely caught it in time. She frowned, gripping the weapon hesitantly. I am no warrior. Zaram's sharp gaze didn't waver. And yet, every day you sit in council, surrounded by enemies. She stiffened. She knew what he meant. In the past weeks, she had been forced to stand before nobles who sought to undermine her, to hold power in a kingdom that still whispered of rebellion. She had endured the scrutiny, the doubt, the treachery. But she had never fought. She caught the staff and tested its weight. It was lighter than she expected, but the expectation of what this training meant felt heavy on her shoulders. Her first attempt was pathetic. She swung too wide, her grip too loose. The momentum nearly knocked her off balance. Zaram caught the staff before it could hit the ground. She gritted her teeth, expecting a reprimand. But he only stepped closer, adjusting her hands without a word. His movements were careful but firm, his fingers guiding hers into the proper hold. His voice was steady when he spoke. Strength isn't about force, he murmured. It's about knowing when to strike and when to wait. He took a step back. Again. Odera exhaled slowly. She swung. The movement was clumsy, but this time, she didn't falter. She practiced until her arms ached, until sweat slicked her skin beneath her training robes. Zaram did not praise her, but he did not stop her either. He made her walk, correcting her stance, making her block, showing her where to move. By the time the sky turned to a deep shade of indigo, she could barely lift the staff. Her body screamed in protest. But when she met Zaram's gaze, she saw the slightest nod of approval. You'll return tomorrow, he said. It wasn't a question. She hesitated, then nodded. His words stayed with her long after the training ended. She was not yet strong. But she would be. Days passed. The rebellion did not die. Instead, it spread. A second false decree appeared, this time from within the palace itself. The message had been slipped into official correspondence, sealed with a forged royal sigil. It was expertly done, so well that, had it not been for Odera's growing paranoia, she might have believed it herself. Someone inside her court was feeding the rebellion. And she had little time to uncover the traitor. The council meetings grew tenser, the conversation sharper. Each noble eyed the other with careful calculation, suspicion threading through every word. Odera watched them all. She studied the way Lord Okafor tapped his fingers against the table, his gaze flicking toward her only when he thought she wasn't looking. She noticed how Lady Adogo's expression remained carefully neutral, how she never spoke unless directly addressed. And Chancellor Zubolu, always composed, always unreadable. She could trust no one. Late one night, as she read through scrolls in her chambers, her eyes burning from lack of sleep, she barely heard the soft rustling sound. Something had been slipped beneath her door. She hesitated before picking it up. The parchment was rough against her fingertips, the ink bold and hurried as if the writer had been rushed. No seal. No signature. Only 4 words. Beware the council. Not all serve the crown. Odera's pulse quickened. She turned the parchment over, searching for any mark, any clue. Nothing. The words felt like a knife at her throat. Someone inside the palace had written this. Someone close enough to know the danger. But the warning was vague. Who among them was the traitor? She thought of Zubolo's knowing smiles. Okafor's restless fingers. Adogo's careful silence. She thought of the faceless voices behind the rebellion, whispering lies in the streets, turning the people against her. She had spent weeks in council, speaking of war and alliances, politics and strategy. But now, she was fighting an enemy she could not see. And the worst part, he was being watched. The council chamber was packed. The long, curved table where the titled lords and elders sat was lined with scrolls, wax-sealed documents, and unfinished letters, all momentarily abandoned in favor of the single matter at hand. Odera's rule. She could feel the tension like a storm building in the air. Nobles whispered among themselves, their voices sharp with hidden agendas. The great torches along the chamber walls flickered, casting shifting shadows on the stone floor. At the head of the table sat Chancellor Zubolo, his expression calm but unreadable. Beside him, Chief Okafor of the Eastern Province leaned forward, his fingers stippled, his dark robes pulling around his seat like ink. She is unproven, he declared, his voice heavy with condescension. Her reign is fragile at best. She has held the kingdom together in the absence of the crown prince, Lord Udachukwu countered, his hand resting firmly on the hilt of his ceremonial dagger. Few would have done as well. A scoff came from the far end of the table. But for how long, a noblewoman challenged. Lady Adogo, her lips pursed. The people murmur. The markets grow uneasy. She sits on a throne that was never meant for her. Murmurs rippled through the room. Odera took a steady breath, forcing herself to remain still as they argued over her like she wasn't standing right there. Then, at last, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. This was her moment. She stepped forward, her hands loosely clasped behind her back, her chin lifted. I was never meant to rule, she admitted. Her voice was clear, unwavering. A murmur of approval, or was it surprise, moved through the nobles. She continued, her gaze sweeping the room. I was raised to support my brother. To serve. That was my duty. She let her words settle, let them see the truth in them. But he is not here. And our enemies do not wait for him to return. her pulse thrummed in her ears. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but she did not let it break her. She met their gazes one by one, daring them to look away. So tell me, my lords, do you seek a ruler who was chosen by birth, or one who chooses to fight for her people? The chamber was silent. Even the flickering torches seemed to hold their breath. Then, one by one, the heads began to bow. First Lord Udichukwu, his aged features solemn. Then Lady Adogo, her previous sharpness replaced by something resembling reluctant respect. Chief Okofor hesitated, but eventually, his head followed. The last was Zubulu, his lips pressed in. But after a long moment, he bowed nonetheless. Odera exhaled. She had always been a shadow. But tonight, she stepped into the light. The days that followed were strangely quiet. The rebellion's whispers faded, its strength faltering. The people who had doubted her rule now spoke her name with measured caution. Some in admiration, others in fear. And though Anoka remained ill, the kingdom did not crumble. Because Odera stood strong. She had ordered fortifications in the city, strengthening borders where spies had slipped through. The guards now patrolled the streets in silence, their presence enough to warn against further unrest. But Odera knew this was only the beginning. One evening, as she walked through the palace gardens, the scent of night-blooming flowers filling the air, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Zaram. He watched her for a long moment before speaking. You did well, he said, his voice gruff as always. She turned to face him, the weight of everything settling upon her shoulders. The battles. The betrayals. The choices. And the throne she had never wanted, but now refused to surrender. I was afraid, she admitted softly. Zaram studied her, his dark eyes unreadable. But you did not falter, he said. She considered that for a long moment. No, she hadn't. She had stood before the council, the nobles, the entire kingdom. She had dared them to deny her. And they had bowed. Odera turned toward the horizon, where the first hint of dawn touched the sky, bathing the palace rooftops in soft golden light. I was a shadow, she murmured. She exhaled, shoulders lighter than before. But not anymore.